The movie starts with Adrian Monk, a very famous police detective who managed to solve 14 murder cases. But now he is retired because he suffers from obsessive-compulsive disorder. During the COVID pandemic, he spent 2 years at home, stopped working, and kept analyzing himself every 20 minutes. He also developed a severe phobia of getting sick. Monk is currently working for a magazine, writing a book about the 140 murder cases he solved. However, the management doesn't like his writing style. Whenever he writes about a case, he only spends 2 pages on it, and then fills the rest of the pages talking about his gas stove, his vacuum cleaner, how they work, and a lot of unnecessary details that nobody cares about. Because of that, the magazine asks him to return the advance payment he received. He is completely shocked and begs them to reconsider, promising that he will fix everything next time. But they refuse, saying the decision came from the top management. Monk feels extremely upset, especially since the money was supposed to pay for Molly's wedding, his stepdaughter who stayed by his side and took care of him during COVID, and asked him to cover the wedding expenses. He leaves the office feeling suffocated by everything, believing he has failed and ruined Molly's wedding. He approaches the window, looks down, starts opening the glass, and is about to jump. But a woman suddenly appears behind him and warns him not to do it. Later, we realize that she isn't real, and he is the only one who can see her. Monk goes to the airport completely devastated, holding a sign that says the wedding is cancelled. But Molly arrives and tells him not to worry about anything, saying the backyard space is very nice. He jokes that he's glad the space is small so he doesn't have to invite his awful relatives. Everyone stands together, then Natalie arrives. Molly runs toward her and hugs her, while Monk turns his face away, looking upset with her. Natalie explains that she loves him very much and that she worked as his assistant for 12 years. But he is still angry because he thought she abandoned him when she left with Steven, even though she had no choice. She tells him he was a great boss to her and apologizes. Molly helps fix things between them, and they hug. Natalie tells him she is now a very successful and famous real estate agent, and wants him to be happy for her success. Randy arrives and greets Monk, but Monk doesn't respond and is still mad at him too, because Randy left and took another job and moved away, even though Monk himself told him to go and start a new life and not look back. After Randy leaves, Molly tells them that Monk hasn't been the same since the Trudy case, and that his OCD destroyed his life because he stayed home for so long. She says she would have gone crazy if it weren't for Griffin being in her life. Monk goes back home, and a delivery guy from the pharmacy brings his medication. The delivery guy tells him this is the last refill and that they need to contact Dr. Bell to see if he will prescribe the same medicine again. But Monk refuses and says there's no need, and that he doesn't even want the medication anymore. He only has a $20 bill and feels extremely stressed because he has to give the delivery guy a tip. He starts sweating and offers the $20, but keeps hesitating because it's a lot of money. Every time the guy reaches for it, Monk pulls his hand back. In the end, he gives up and hands over the $20, then quickly closes the door so he won't take it back and start the cycle again. He goes to the bathroom, puts the medicine box with the others, and it's been a very long time since he last took his meds. He writes in his notebook that he didn't take his medication today, and 3 days later he schedules an appointment with Dr. Bell. He visits him later and they talk about the lecture Dr. Bell gave on the radio, where he mentioned 4 patients, referring to Monk's disorders. The doctor tells him he shouldn't give up on life, and even though he lost the book deal, he is still getting job offers. Meanwhile, Griffin is with Rick Eden, the famous billionaire, who is testing a rocket that will orbit the Earth. Rick's wife approaches Griffin and shows that she knows him and reads his articles, without her husband knowing. After the test succeeds, they go outside together. Rick talks about how similar he and Griffin are, and how they both love adventure. Griffin is known for dangerous stunts and once flew near an active volcano. But Griffin doesn't want to discuss personal topics and says he came to talk about his former partner, Harlan Rose Smith. Rick gets annoyed and says he doesn't want to talk about it, but Griffin insists. Rick finally admits that he drowned him while diving and paid the sailors a lot of money to stay quiet. In the end, Rick threatens Griffin to watch himself, saying next time he might fall into a real active volcano. After that, someone sneaks into Griffin's house and enters the warehouse where he works. The next morning, Griffin measures his rope because he plans to jump off the bridge to practice his favorite sport. After he finishes, he goes with Molly to the bridge and gets ready to jump. Molly is terrified and can't even watch. Griffin jumps and seems to be enjoying it, but something goes wrong, and he dies. Molly runs toward him to check on him, but they stop her and tell her the rope was 2 meters too long and that he must have made a mistake while measuring it. At the same time, Monk is sitting in the garden, imagining that his late wife is sitting with him, telling her that he's almost ready to join her. Randy arrives and tells him what happened, and Monk rushes out immediately. Molly is completely devastated and crying, and Monk reaches her as fast as he can and tries to comfort her. A week later, they go to court to review the case. Monk brings his disinfectant machine with him and doesn't allow anyone else to use it. The court unanimously rules that the death was an accident. The others keep trying to convince Monk to solve the case, but he's very tense and says he has extremely personal matters he needs to deal with first, things he's already postponed for a week. He's actually referring to suicide. After thinking about it for a moment, he decides to go with them. Monk learns that Molly heard a man wearing a beanie and white nail polish say that the rope was exactly 2 meters too long. If it were a normal person, they would have said, about 1.5 meters, or around 2 meters. But this man was very specific. Police investigations also confirmed that the rope was exactly 2 meters too long, which means that man knew exactly what had happened. Because of Monk's experience and intelligence, he realizes that baseball players often wear white nail polish on their hands, which makes the search much easier. He goes to the place where Griffin worked and carefully inspects it. Monk notices that the trophies aren't arranged properly, which suggests that someone fell from the place. He also finds paint chips from a window. He steps outside to investigate further and discovers broken tree branches, which further proves that it was a murder. The main problem now is that Griffin measured the rope himself, so how could this be a murder? At that moment, Randy arrives with a photo of the man who was on the bridge. They find out his name is Lucas Kubrick and that he works for Rick Eden's company. That confirms that Rick is behind Griffin's death. They go to visit Rick at his house, and since they know the head of security, Leland, they set up a meeting very quickly. They confront Rick and accuse him of killing Griffin after threatening him, but Rick denies having anything to do with it. Then they reveal the truth about his former partner, Harlan Rose Smith, and that Rick took over the other half of the company, meaning he benefited from Harlan's death. At that point, Leland takes Monk into another room and yells at him, saying he was tricked and didn't know they were coming to accuse Rick. But Monk is already certain that Rick killed Griffin. Monk finds Griffin's magazine at Rick's place and notices an original painting that strongly catches his attention and helps him realize something important. Monk goes to Molly and shows her all the people who were there, asking her to look more closely. He then finds Griffin's suit and discovers the speech paper he was supposed to read at the wedding inside it. Molly breaks down in tears, and Monk hugs her, telling her that he has other suits, as if trying to comfort her in his own way and give her space to cry. Monk goes to the police department to get the latest updates, and Leland goes with him because they've been friends for a long time and worked together before. They try to convince Monk to return as a police consultant again, especially since there are 22 open murder cases that haven't been solved yet, but he refuses because he has other things he needs to take care of himself. Natalie takes the permanent badge, hands it to Monk, and they go in to review the bridge security cameras, watching everyone who was there. Monk later speaks privately with Leland and tells him that Rick is the killer, but Leland refuses to believe it because he's happy with his new life and feels like nothing is missing. After that, Monk goes to see Dr. Bell and talks to him about what's been happening in his life since he returned to work. Monk says the feeling is extremely frightening, that he suspects Rick, but at the same time doesn't, yet deep down he's certain. This contradiction leaves him deeply confused, especially since Leland believes Rick didn't do anything wrong. Dr. Bell asks Monk if he's still seeing his wife, Trudy. Even though Monk can see her sitting on the couch, he lies and says she's not there. Dr. Bell then pulls out some tissues and starts crying, telling Monk that he retired from medicine 2 months ago. He says he loves Monk very much, and that Monk is now his only patient, someone who must help himself and look at everything he's accomplished in his life. Monk starts crying too, but says that crime rates have gone up and shows him that there are many new crimes happening. Later, Monk notices that someone is threatening the Walton Animal Shelter. At the same time, Rick Eden goes to his factory and talks to Lucas Kubrick, telling him that a detective came to his house asking about him. Lucas says he carried out the job exactly as Rick told him, and that if Rick wants Monk eliminated, he'd do it for free. But Rick stops him and says that's enough, that he's already done what was required. Leland is in the surveillance room and notices Rick talking to Lucas, which confirms that Monk was right and that Rick is involved in the case. Monk goes to the animal shelter and sees the threatening message. He recognizes Rick's handwriting immediately. It's an exact match. He also remembers that when he was at Rick's house 2 days earlier, he saw a note with the same shelter address. That confirms Rick Eden sent the threat, though Monk still doesn't understand why. They find a small dog named Walton who is blind and was about to be euthanized. Natalie notices many similarities between the dog's behavior and Monk's and suggests that Monk adopt him. Monk refuses, especially since he's been thinking about suicide. As they leave and get into the car, Monk notices Lucas sitting in another vehicle making a delivery. At that moment, Monk realizes that Rick was planning to send threatening messages to several companies and chose the animal shelter as a cover to carry out his crime, then kill Lucas after he was exposed. They try to chase him, but Natalie can't steer the car fast enough and keeps trying to adjust. Monk gets frustrated, jumps out of the car, and runs after Lucas to warn him that he's carrying a bomb. Before he can say anything, the bomb explodes and Lucas is killed. Monk steps on animal waste on the ground, slips, falls, and starts crying. Natalie initially thinks he was injured by the explosion and tries to check on him, but Monk tells her they need to amputate his leg because he won't be able to handle it. When she looks at his shoe, she walks away in frustration, almost cursing him. Monk then sits off to the side, takes off the shoe, and buries it in the sand, because his obsessive-compulsive disorder is overwhelming and unbearable. Leland arrives, and they confirm that Rick is responsible for everything that happened. Leland tells Monk he won't resign yet and will help first to arrest Rick. He manages to get Monk into the party so Monk can sneak into the computer room and retrieve the evidence. But because Monk is obsessed with everything being perfectly organized, he gets delayed by a large crowd. Eventually, Rick realizes Monk has arrived and takes him to his office. Rick admits that he killed Griffin after offering him a prestigious position in his company, which Griffin refused. Rick then makes a new offer, $1 billion in exchange for Monk walking away and forgetting everything. $1 billion is incredibly tempting, but Monk refuses and tells him that money can't buy everything. Rick laughs and goes outside to watch the fireworks. At that moment, Monk steals the computer and runs. He contacts Leland to ask for directions, but he doesn't even know where he is. He runs toward a stadium and accidentally turns on the lights, then quickly turns them off. But because of his OCD, he's forced to turn them on and off repeatedly. That's when Rick figures out his location and chases him while holding a gun. They reach a cliff, and Rick overpowers Monk, takes the computer back, and throws Monk off the hill into the water, convinced he's dead. But later, Monk returns to Molly. It turns out that the bride doll thrown at the beginning of the party saved him from drowning. Molly is extremely worried about him and tells him to forget everything, saying she's at peace now and wants to move on with her life. But Monk tells her that Rick confessed to killing Griffin in front of him, he just didn't explain how. That confession is exactly what they need to arrest him. Monk goes home, organizes everything, and prepares himself for death so he can reunite with his wife. He enters a coffin shop to choose one he likes, but the twin employees keep arguing. Monk tells them that one of their heads is 6 millimeters larger than the other. When he sees the measuring tapes they used, Monk realizes the method Rick used to kill Griffin. Monk understands that Rick knew everything about Griffin and knew that Griffin always measured the rope himself. That's why Rick had Lucas make a rope that was slightly 2 meters longer than Griffin's, then broke into Griffin's house and replaced it, leading directly to Griffin's death. Meanwhile, Rick is on the plane, about to begin his trip around the Earth, when an arrest warrant arrives charging him with murder. Monk is standing outside the door and notices that the glass isn't clean. Because of his OCD, he sprays water and starts cleaning it. Then he opens the door, and Rick is shocked to see that Monk is still alive after being thrown off the cliff. Rick is arrested, everyone is relieved, and justice is finally served. Monk goes back to the garden where he used to sit with his wife. He sprays his medication and prepares to commit suicide, but Trudy appears and tries to stop him, telling him that she's not alone. Griffin appears as well, telling Monk that he helped him, spoke on his behalf, and brought him justice, and that he's now at peace. Several people whose cases Monk solved in the past appear and thank him for giving them justice and peace of mind. One woman appears whom Monk doesn't recognize and tells him she's still in the morgue waiting for him to solve her case. At that moment, Monk decides not to kill himself and chooses to continue helping people and solving cases. Molly arrives and hands him his badge, and Monk is ready to return to work as a consultant. He walks alone, smiling, followed by the 141 people whose cases he solved in the past. At the end of the movie, Natalie leaves him a message at home, telling him to take good care of each other. Monk sees the dog move and stop in front of him, and he's genuinely happy to see him. And here, our movie comes to an end. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.